Disclaimer. This video contains intense and frightening content meant for entertainment purposes. It may include scenes that some viewers may find disturbing or unsettling. We recommend viewer discretion, especially for those sensitive to horror themes or with underlying medical conditions that could be affected by intense content. The events portrayed in this video are entirely fictional, and any resemblance to real-life situations or individuals is coincidental. We do not endorse harmful or illegal activities. By continuing to watch, you acknowledge the content warning and proceed at your own discretion.
Story 1. Airbnb Nightmare Trapped by Evil. It was a dark and stormy night, and I found myself in a small, unfamiliar town. I had booked an Airbnb for the weekend, looking forward to a relaxing getaway from the hustle and bustle of city life. Little did I know that I was about to experience a night I would never forget. The Airbnb listing had seemed charming and cozy in the photos, nestled in a remote part of the countryside. The host, Sarah, had received glowing reviews, and the price was too good to pass up. It was a quaint little cottage, advertised as a peaceful retreat from the world. But as I approached the place, a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The cottage was isolated, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to swallow up the feeble light of the street lamps. The wind howled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony that made my skin crawl. I shook off my unease, attributing it to the eerie atmosphere of the stormy night. Sarah had left a key for me under the doormat, and I let myself in. The interior was charming, as promised. A cozy living room with a crackling fireplace, a well-equipped kitchen, and a bedroom with a comfortable-looking bed. But something felt off. It was as though the cottage held its secrets close, hidden in the shadows. I settled in and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that had taken hold of me. I decided to make some dinner, but the kitchen seemed unusually well-stocked, as if it had been recently used. Pots and pans were still warm to the touch, and there were fresh groceries on the counter. I couldn't help but wonder if someone had been here just before my arrival. As I sat down to eat, I heard a faint whisper, like a soft breeze rustling through the trees. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I heard it again, closer this time. My heart raced as I realized the whisper was coming from the bedroom. Trembling, I got up and slowly pushed the bedroom door open. The sight that met my eyes froze me in my tracks. There, sitting on the edge of the bed, was a pale, gaunt figure. It was Sarah, the Airbnb host. Her eyes were hollow and her lips were cracked and bleeding. She looked at me with a vacant expression, and her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke. "You shouldn't have come here," she muttered. "This place, it's cursed." Was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. Sarah's story spilled out in fragments, a tale of a dark past and a malevolent presence that had taken hold of the cottage. She had been unable to leave, trapped by forces beyond her control. The cottage had lured guests in, and once they arrived, it wouldn't let them leave. I didn't know whether to believe her or if she was simply delirious. But as the night wore on, I began to hear strange noises, whispers in the walls, footsteps in the attic, and a chilling laughter that echoed through the cottage. It was as if the very walls were alive, watching and waiting. I knew I had to escape, to get out of that cursed place. I made a run for the front door, but it slammed shut with a deafening crash, as if an invisible force was blocking my way. Panic consumed me as I realized I was trapped, just like Sarah. Hours passed in that living nightmare. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, praying for dawn to break and release me from this hellish place. The malevolent presence seemed to grow stronger, its sinister laughter echoing through the cottage. When morning finally came, the cottage was silent. The storm had passed, and I cautiously made my way to the front door. It opened easily, as if nothing had happened. I fled, leaving behind the cottage and its dark secrets. To this day, I can't explain what I experienced that night. Was it a malevolent spirit, a curse that had taken hold of the cottage? Or had Sarah's torment driven her to madness? I may never know the truth, but one thing is certain. I will never forget the Airbnb nightmare that unfolded in that remote, cursed cottage. Story 2, Whispering Shadows. It was a cool autumn evening when I stumbled upon the listing that would forever haunt my dreams. I had been searching for a peaceful escape from the city's chaos and found the perfect spot, a charming cabin nestled deep within the woods. The photos showcased a serene paradise, and the host, a woman named Eleanor, had received glowing reviews. With great anticipation, I booked my stay for the weekend. The drive to the cabin was an adventure in itself. I followed winding roads through a dense forest, my GPS guiding me deeper into the wilderness. As night fell, the trees closed in around me, their branches casting eerie shadows on the narrow path. I could feel the isolation seeping into my bones, but I brushed off my unease as typical jitters from being in such a remote location. Arriving at the cabin, I marveled at its rustic charm. It was a quaint, two-story abode with a spacious wooden deck that overlooked a tranquil lake. The inside was equally inviting, with a cozy living room, a fully equipped kitchen, and a bedroom that promised restful nights. As I settled in, I couldn't help but notice how immaculate the cabin was. It was as though it had been recently cleaned and prepared for my arrival, but I dismissed my suspicions, assuming Eleanor was simply an attentive host. I unpacked, started a fire in the fireplace, and settled down for a quiet evening. It wasn't long before strange things began to happen. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. I was reading a book when I heard it, a faint whisper, too low to make out any words. I strained my ears, wondering if the wind was playing tricks on me. But then it happened again, closer this time, as though someone was standing just behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest as fear began to creep over me. I told myself it was my imagination, that the isolation and the howling wind outside were playing tricks on my mind. But as the night deepened, so did the inexplicable occurrences. Footsteps echoed in the cabin when I knew I was alone. Objects moved on their own, sliding across tables and counters. And then there were the whispers, growing louder and more distinct. Terrified, I grabbed my phone and tried to call Eleanor, but there was no signal. It was as though I had been cut off from the outside world. Panic set in as I realized I was completely isolated with whatever malevolent presence haunted this cabin. As the night wore on, I huddled in the bedroom, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The whispers grew into guttural voices, taunting and threatening me. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on grotesque shapes that seemed to watch my every move. I knew I had to leave, but every attempt to open the front door was met with resistance, as if an invisible force held it shut. Time seemed to blur in that nightmarish cabin. I felt a growing dread that I was not alone, that something malevolent lurked just beyond my sight. Exhausted and terrified, I barricaded myself in the bedroom, praying for dawn to break. When morning finally came, the cabin was silent. The supernatural forces that had tormented me had retreated with the night. The once charming retreat now felt like a sinister prison, and I wasted no time packing my belongings. As I left the cabin behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped a malevolent presence that had lured me to this remote place. I vowed never to return and to warn others of the sinister Airbnb listing that had become my terrifying nightmare. To this day, I wonder about the secrets that cabin holds, and I'm haunted by the malevolent forces that reside within its walls. It was a weekend escape that turned into a living nightmare, a tale I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. Story 3, The Uninvited Guest. I was looking forward to a quiet weekend getaway, away from the city's relentless hustle and bustle. The Airbnb listing promised solitude, nestled deep in the heart of the forest. The photos showed a charming cabin surrounded by towering pines, and the host, a woman named Emily, had received rave reviews. Little did I know that this retreat would become the stuff of my darkest nightmares. Upon arrival, the cabin looked exactly as it had in the pictures, an idyllic refuge from the world. As I stepped inside, the scent of fresh pine filled the air, and the cozy ambiance welcomed me. It was perfect, or so it seemed. The first day passed uneventfully. I hiked through the woods, reveled in the serenity, and marveled at the beauty of nature. However, as twilight descended, an unease crept over me. I had a feeling that I was not alone in the cabin. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it, an eerie, disembodied whisper, barely audible. My heart quickened, and I strained it to discern its source. The voice grew louder, yet it remained incoherent, like a spectral murmur from another realm. Panic set in as I searched every nook and cranny of the cabin, but I found nothing amiss. Unable to shake off the eerie encounter, I locked myself in the bedroom, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the wind or a figment of my imagination. But the whispers persisted, and they were accompanied by strange, inexplicable phenomena. Objects moved on their own, and the room's temperature fluctuated wildly. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay there, trembling, as the cabin seemed to come alive with unseen forces. In the pitch-black room, I felt a presence, a malevolent entity, lurking just beyond my vision. The air grew thick with tension, as though the walls held their breath, waiting. As dawn approached, I decided to confront Emily, the host, about the unnerving occurrences. But when I reached for my phone, it was missing. I scoured the cabin, retracing my steps from the night before, but my phone had vanished without a trace. Panicked and disconnected from the outside world, I faced the chilling realization that I was trapped in this nightmarish cabin with an otherworldly entity. As I desperately tried to find answers, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the cabin's attic. Inside, I discovered a journal, a diary written by Emily herself. It detailed her descent into madness during her own stay in the cabin. She had experienced the same paranormal phenomena, the whispers and the feeling of being watched. Emily's final entry was a plea for help, a desperate cry to escape the malevolent presence that tormented her. Terrified, I knew I had to find a way out. But the cabin's windows were now boarded up, and the front door refused to budge. I was trapped, just as Emily had been, and the malevolent entity seemed to relish in its newfound prey. The days turned into a never-ending nightmare. As I battled the supernatural forces that held me captive, whispers grew into anguished screams, and the cabin itself seemed to contort and shift, its walls closing in on me. I could only endure so much, and my sanity began to unravel. In my darkest moments, I heard Emily's voice, pleading with me to find a way out, to break the curse that bound us to this wretched place. Her presence offered some solace in the madness, a connection to someone who had experienced the same horrors. Weeks turned into months, and I lost track of time. Then, one fateful night, the cabin fell silent. The malevolent entity had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. With trembling hands, I pried the boards off the windows and fled, leaving behind the cursed cabin and the diary of a woman who had suffered a similar fate. To this day, I bear the scars of that nightmarish Airbnb stay. I will never know the true nature of the malevolent entity that haunted the cabin, but I carry with me the harrowing memories of its whispers and the terror that it unleashed. It was an escape gone horribly wrong, an Airbnb nightmare from which I may never truly awaken.